Story 1. The Eternal Suicide. It seems archaic, putting pen to paper in this date and age. Hell, it's been so long that I am archaic. I figure after so long I should at least retell my story on the off chance I succeed tonight. It'll take some time, but the true question is, do you have the time to listen? Well, I have time. That's all I truly have left. Time. A military unit was sent into the heart of Africa to quell a rebellion that was causing problems around the area. They had holed themselves up in an area that the locals feared and only spoke of in hushed whispers. My squad was sent in to kill or disperse the rebels, and for years I have cursed that day. Why did I ever volunteer for that mission? Why did I allow myself to want such a terrible burden? As they say, the road to hell is filled with good intentions. The valley they had chosen was well defended, surrounded by rocky walls, covered by thick foliage, and only accessible by a thin crevice found underground. This place was a natural fortress. Legend says that this place was once home to a man, a woman, and their many daughters. The woman was young and beautiful, and her children were equally so. As the years went by, the mother began to age, and the children grew more and more beautiful. One night, the eldest daughter and the other were speaking in private, as they often did. The daughter claimed she was even more beautiful than her mother. The mother laughed and told her that her beauty was unmatched. But the daughter Percy stayed and persuaded her to look into a nearby stream and see for herself. When the mother did, she was horrified to find that she was indeed less beautiful than her daughter. Time had given her wrinkles, white brittle hair, and cloudy eyes. In a fit of rage she grabbed her daughter by the throat and shook her. She shook her, screaming at her that she had stolen her beauty. The dog, Aether, tried to fight back, but quickly succumbed to her once loving mother. After she was dead, the mother looked once more into the stream and saw her beauty return. Overjoyed, she returned to her home, claiming the eldest daughter had left to find herself a husband. Years passed, and once again the mother began to age. Slowly at first, but then faster and faster she aged, growing feebler each passing day. Again she took the now eldest daughter to the stream and spoke to her. Before the daughter could say a word, she was strangled by her mother, and as her life faded away, the other's beauty returned. Again and again she did this, until she was left alone with her husband. One day the husband went for a walk with his wife, and they came upon the same stream. As they spoke, he tripped upon what he thought was a root. When he examined it, he saw that it was a bone. The mother insisted it was merely an animal bone, but her husband continued to look and soon found the remains of all of his daughters. Enraged, he turned to look at his wife and saw that she was reaching for his throat as well. He quickly subdued her and then trapped her in a small cave at the far end of the little valley. He prayed the gods curse her with the immortality she so desperately wanted. The gods obliged him, and since that day a small stream flowed from that cave. It was said to be the mother's tears of sadness, regret, anger, and even madness that flowed from that cave, from the woman cursed with immortality. When my squad arrived at that cursed place, we knew nothing of the legends. We knew our mission, and nothing else mattered. However, fate rarely has the same goals in mind for those it has power over. When we arrived, the rebels' camp was destroyed. The smell of blood and gun powder pervaded through the air. We found bodies that were riddled with spears, knives, or cut to ribbons. Nothing made sense. It was like a scene out of a western. We searched but found no sign of whom or what could have done this. We stopped our search by a stream and radioed in our findings. I knelt by a stream and drank heartily, washing my face and hair as we awaited a reply. A solider to my left let out a gurgling choke. A spear had made its home through his throat. We immediately took arms and searched for who had thrown it. More spears flew, and 2 more soldiers fell. Dead, the remaining 3 of us ran towards the exit. War calls could be heard behind us and ahead of us. I ran for all I was worth, passing my comrades and reaching the exit, only to find the exit blocked by 2 men dressed in black. I opened fire with my gun and cut them down as I ran through the entrance. I looked back to my dismay. I saw my friends speared and decapitated behind me. I pulled a grenade and threw it at the entrance with a scream of hatred. It did its job, and the small entrance collapsed in on itself, but not before a spear was thrown and caught me in the chest. By some divine luck of the thrower, it missed my protective plates and ran me through. I collapsed on the cavern floor, bleeding profusely and SCR. Aiming with all my might, I was trained in basic first aid, but I ignored everything I'd been taught and pulled the spear out of my chest. I could tell by the blood I'd lost that I'd beat had before I could make it out. I did my best to staunch the bleeding and took some morphine to bring down the pain. After that, I slowly got to my feet and stumbled out into the light before collapsing, welcoming the blackness that surrounded me. I awoke in a hospital bed hours later. Astonished, I sat upright and tore at the bandages till I saw the scar, a thin line over my heart. Washington is all that remained of the ghastly wound. I must have been babbling for quite some time because a nurse soon came over to ask what was wrong. I was stabbed through the heart with a spear. I can't still be alive. It's impossible. I screamed, anger bleeding through my words. Sir, you had a simple slash wound. It barely reached your ribs. Please come down. She replied, I couldn't believe it. I ran from the hospital as soon as I was dressed. I booked the first flight I could find from that horrible country back home. I hitchhiked home, and I never spoke of what happened to me. I couldn't face it. I couldn't believe that I had nearly died that day. My dreams were haunted from that day on. I saw the spear impaled through my body again, saw the remains of my comrades reaching out to me. Their eyes were full of spite at the fact that I had survived where they had not. Every night I woke screaming how sorry I was for surviving, for leaving them behind. Years said by far quicker than they should have. 10 years to the day, and my body was still the same as it had been. My family aged, but I still had the glow of youth. I always did. The doctors called it a modern miracle. I couldn't age. At first I saw it as a gift, some cosmic repayment for seeing that place and losing so much there. Then one day, while driving with my family, it happened. A semi-truck ran a red light and slammed into the car, flipping us end over end. I was thrown from the back seat and skidded across the road like a rag doll. At first I thought our miracle had happened. I felt the pain of road rash and bruises that would accompany the bouncing around before that. Then I looked down and saw all the damage. My rib cage was obviously crushed. My leg was bent backwards at a horrible angle, and a piece of the car had found its way through my throat. I lay there, once again welcoming the warm, dark embrace of death once more. Again I woke in a hospital bed, groggy, exhausted, and confused beyond belief. I looked over and saw a sheriff sitting beside my bed. He informed me that my family had died in the car accident, and that by some miracle I had been spared. I looked myself over and saw my chest was back to normal. My neck was wrapped in gauze, but when I tore it away, all I found was a star-shaped scar. I wept for hours, screaming at everything and nothing. I wanted to die. I wanted the same fate as my family. Eventually I checked myself out and just started to wander around. I never ate, yet I wasn't hungry. I never drank, and yet I didn't feel thirst. How many years went by, I'll never know. 60, 70, I stopped keeping track. There I was, the man stuck in time, given the gift of life for all eternity. Yet all I wanted was death. Everyone I knew was dead, and each night when I slept I saw their faces, twisted in death from trauma, age, and most of all jealousy. They hated me and wanted to rip me apart. Each night I saw the same images, and every time I'd wake with such fear and sorrow at my existence. Now, as I sit here with all the time in the world, I want to warn you, eternity is a long, long time. I've seen horrible things and greatness. Now all I want to see is my tombstone, holding the loaded shotgun to my throat, so that the shot will go straight through my head for the 8th time. Tonight I know now that this is nothing more than a curse. I know that this won't end me. I know that every time I cut my head off, it'll stay alive till I pick it up and put it back on. And I know that each time I hold a grenade in my teeth, it'll just put me out for a little while. At this point, that's all spend my time on. It's the only thing that I can do to keep the nightmares at bay, the eternal suicide. That what I think I'll call this. Now, if you excuse me, I have many more attempts before I resign myself to more nightmares. Story 2, South Ferry. Even from the far end of the platform, seeing the whole of the lower station at 190th Street, Harold noticed only one other person waiting for the train. Granted, it was quite late, around 2:30 a.m. On what day was it? A weeknight, but still, it seemed unusually quiet. Harold could hear a single drip ticking the seconds away. Not quite seconds, Harold noticed. A little slower. He studied his watch, listening to the drops plop into the still, murky puddle on the tracks. Yes, the drip was slightly behind the ticking of the thin red hand of his watch, but only just barely. The puddle, obviously filthy, was large, filling up nearly the entire width of the train tracks and almost spreading to the third rail. Harold vaguely wondered what would happen if it did, and if a rat decided to take a shortcut through. What would be to the eggplant-sized rodent a pond, really almost a swamp? Would it be electrocuted? How did the third rail work, anyway? There was always so much filthy water on the tracks, particularly after a heavy rain. One would think the tracks would be constantly littered with the charred carcasses of electrocut rats. Harold thought vaguely that there must be some kind of fail-safe against that sort of thing, although he hadn't the slightest notion of what that might be. Besides, There were no rats to be seen on the tracks tonight. Harold had the habit of scanning the dark crevasses of the subway tracks, the piles of garbage commuters had thrown onto them, for rats, to keep himself amused while waiting for the often insufferably slow train. The bigger the rat, the better. Sometimes, while he searched for the critters below, he'd see something move out of the corner of his eye, a shadow on the platform next to where he was standing. Of course, it would be a rat, usually the biggest, grossest, and most bloated of rats, the godfathers, Harold called them. Harold remembered once catching the glance of a young woman standing near him as a rat the size of a deformed kitten with gigantism hobbled across the platform, wobbled as though stuffed from a horrifying Thanksgiving din. The young woman had paled, sickened, and gave a soft cry, backing away from the strange creature. Harold could feel the hair on his neck rising as his eyes locked with the poor young woman's. What sleepy, hideous, dull obscenity was this? Harold and the woman both remained frozen as the little nightmare crawled away. He knew they were the only people that had seen the rat. As passengers elsewhere continued to chat with one another or listened to their music or check their phones, oblivious to the filthy, dull-eyed vermin only feet away from them, Harold remembered shuddering. How often had he himself stood on the platform, waiting for the train, oblivious to the horrible, slinky, wet creatures scuttering around him. But tonight all the rats seemed to have vacated the station. Harold found himself, as always, relieved and somewhat disappointed at the same time. Despite the repulsion he felt at the sight of them, the rats held a certain fascination for him. These were the carriers of the fleas that spread the Black Death during the Middle Ages. These were the companions or fellow tenants of the cockroaches. They were everywhere and anywhere and could sneak up behind you or right in front of you at any time, regardless of your social class, your education, your attractiveness, or lack thereof. Rats, Harold thought, like death, were a gray equalizer. Harold checked his watch. 24 minutes. He'd been waiting. Still no train. Not terribly unusual for the downtown one at this hour, but still slower, and he wanted to be on time. He started to think about what he needed to be on time for, which he was a little fuzzy about for some reason. The late hour, he assured himself, yawning. He did know for sure he had to be in one of the first 5 cars because he was getting off at South Ferry. South Ferry was the last stop on the one train line, and you had to be in one of the first 5 cars to get off. Otherwise, the train would just loop back uptown with you trapped in it, going back the way you came. That had already happened to Harold before, and he was determined not to miss his stop again. Glancing up from his watch, from which he'd been mildly hypnotized, Harold noticed the lone fellow commuter waiting down the platform had moved closer to where Harold stood. His stomach fluttered a little, disconcerted, although the person, even with their back turned to him, now appeared to be an elderly woman. She wore a khaki raincoat with one of those shore cap bonnet things on her head, like the kind his grandmother had worn when it rained, so her coiffed white hair wouldn't get wet. Hardly a threat. Harold hoped she wouldn't come any closer. He had no desire to get sucked into conversation with an old lady, which would most definitely consist of pondering why or complaining about the train delay. Of course, the MTA made no announcements explaining the situation, and probably due to budget cuts, he actually hadn't seen if there was even a teller in the booth. He did wonder what the old lady was doing out at such an hour in this neighborhood, or where she would be going, where anyone would be going at this hour on a weeknight. Was it Tuesday or Wednesday? Was beyond him. Maybe she was headed to visit a dying friend in the hospital. Maybe she was late night, shopping for cat food and inshore. Maybe she was going to get laid. Harold suddenly pictured the old woman removing dentures, licking her puckered up lips smeared with red lipstick, getting ready for some hot date night on the town. He barked out a single laugh, which echoed loudly. Harold clapped his hands over his mouth, squeezing his eyes shut, as though to try and lock the laugh back up before it could escape. But it was too late. It had escaped. Harold opened his eyes. Startled, he saw that the old woman was standing much closer to him now. How did she move so fast? Maybe only 20 feet away, still with her back turned to him. Harold cleared his throat, his heart pounding a little. Not knowing where else to look, he checked his watch again. 2:43 a.m. No sign of tea. He trained, still studying his watch, as though it were the fossil of some unknown dinosaur. Harold noticed that the dripping had stopped. The thinnest hand on his watch, which had been almost in sync the dripping, had also stopped. Out of the corner of his eye, much like the obscenely large rat, Harold noticed a shadow. His heart, which had just begun to slow down, Ted beating wildly again. It was the old woman. She was right next to him, still facing away. A feeling of dread began to seep throughout his body, beginning in his gut and spreading like ice water in his veins. Why was she standing so close? He turned his body slightly, pretending not to notice her. Out of the corner of his eye he saw her begin to sway back and forth. He worried. For a minute she was going to faint. Maybe fall onto the tracks. Please fall onto the tracks. Please don't turn around and look at me. Please don't come any closer. But the swaying was steady, like the dripping had been, and she appeared in no danger of tumbling onto the tracks. Her swaying, in fact, the side to side of it, was sensed up with Harold's heartbeat. Did she know he was scared? Could she hear, sense, feel the rapid thumping of the muscle, pumping blood, and now also terror through his veins? Why was he so afraid? Harold realized with a start that his watch could have been wrong all this time. Was it really 2:43 a.m.? It could be any time, really, any day, really. This only increased the dread he was feeling, the increasingly operatic level of panic vibrating of his chest. Where was the train? The old woman stopped swaying quite suddenly and was still on the platform. Harold could hardly breathe, barely, just barely. He heard a sound coming from her, soft, almost indiscernible. He turned his ear slightly in her direction, still staring at his dead watch. She was giggling. Her shoulders, khaki and the raincoat, began shaking as if she couldn't contain her delight. The giggles, so soft at first, began to get louder and louder. Harold felt a rumbling beneath his feet. In sync with this hideous woman's laughter, he felt the rhythm, the vibration of the train approaching the station, the downtown train to South Ferry. He had to be in one of the first 5 cars to get off at his stop. He desperately anted to get off at his stop. The subway, silver, dented, empty, came roaring into the station. Harold felt the breeze as the train shot by. The old woman's laugh got louder and louder. Oh, it wasn't exactly sounding like a laugh anymore. As the train began to brake, he heard the piercing squeal of the wheels on the metal track, screaming. The old woman was now screaming. The SCR. He was high-pitched, hysterical with laughter, shrieking with horror. It was dissonant and also somehow hauntingly harmonized with the squeal of the brakes. "Please don't turn around, please." The train stopped. All was silent, including the old woman. The train doors opened softly with a gentle bong sound. There was no one else inside. Harold suddenly was sure of something else. No one was driving the train either, and this train was not going to South Ferry. He stepped into the car. The old woman stayed on the platform. Her back was still facing him. He knew she wasn't joining him on the train. She was merely there to greet him. As the doors of the train car closed, as the train began its journey downtown, Harold saw her out of the corner of his eye one last time, like the demonic little rodent on the platform that had caused the young woman such terror. When their eyes had locked in dreaded understanding, he saw the young woman's sheet white face again in his mind, and now knew why she'd been so terrified, because she knew. And that rat knew, because it had come from there, and the old lady knew because she'd been sent from there as well. They knew where the train was really going, and now Harold knew too, where they were all eventually going. Downtown. Story 3. Kitty, can we play Mommy now? Kitty, I'm tired. Alicia sighed. The closet door creaked wider as the child rolled over to see Kitty's glass eyes gleaming in the darkness of the closet. "But I've been waiting all day." "When?" said Kitty in its gruff little voice. "And we haven't played in so long." The child watched as the creature's small, shaggy body emerged from around the base of the door and shambled swiftly across the floor to her bed. It was amazing how Kitty had grown in the weeks since the Alicia had found her at that yard sale. She had been so ratty and matted that Mommy didn't even want Alicia to touch it, let alone bring it home. But Daddy was always a softy, and Alicia could always get what she wanted from him. And so Kitty lived with her now. There followed a brief series of grunts before Kitty's small wolfish face appeared next to the child on the mattress, its plush face expectant. "Please," Kitty crooned. "You know I can't sleep unless we play." The child was tired but knew that once Kitty wanted to play, she would not be denied. Okay. She took off the shirt of her PJs, placed it aside, wrapped her arms around Kitty, and cuddled her to her bare chest. As Alicia softly crooned her favorite bedtime song and rocked Kitty in her arms, she felt the familiar, that still shocking stab under her arm as Kitty's tiny teeth pierced her skin. But the pain was short-lived and quickly replaced by a pleasant warm sensation as Kitty lapped at her flowing blood. Alicia finished the song and lay back down. She placed Kitty next to her, who continued to feed. "I'm worried, Kitty. The doctor said he doesn't know what's wrong with me." Kitty's face emerged from the crook of her arm. "I hope you're going to be okay. You know how much I love you," said Kitty as she licked her lips. "I know," answered Alicia. "I love you too. Are we still going to have the sleepover with your friend?" "Mommy said she doesn't think I should, but Daddy said they would talk about it." "That's good. I can't wait to meet your friend." "What's her name again?" "Gina," answered Alicia. "We'll all have fun playing together. I am tired. Let's go to sleep." "Yeah, we'll have more fun tomorrow." Kitty, good news. Gina is coming to stay tomorrow. Daddy won the talk and her parents said she could. Kitty looked up at her and managed to make his stuffed face smile. That's great, it answered. We'll play all kinds of games. Alicia crossed the room and sat down, slightly out of breath. I told her all about you, but she doesn't believe me. She said I'm making it all up, but won't she, Kitty? You won't go all limp and pretend to be dead like you do when Mom and Dad are around, will you? You told her about me, asked Kitty, its glass eyes somehow narrowing. I know you told me not to, but I thought since she was staying over she should know, and it would be so much fun for all of us to play together. Kitty shuffled over to where Alicia was sitting and held up his stubby paws, indicating that he wanted to be held. Alicia bent over and with some difficulty, picked the creature up. No, W sitting in Alicia's lap, her arms lovingly wrapped around him. Kitty said in a low, gruff whisper, I asked you not to tell anybody about me. I'm sorry, Kitty. It's just that I was so excited. Kitty looked up at her. Did you tell anyone else? Well, just Josh. Kitty looked alarmed. Who's Josh? He's a boy in my kindergarten. He said he wants to marry me. You're going to get me hurt, pleaded Kitty. You can't tell people. They'll find out, and then they'll take me away from you. Do you want that? No. Alicia looked down dejectedly, and Kitty had to admit that Alicia did look sorry. Do you want to play Mommy? She offered, knowing that Kitty always wanted to play Mommy. Okay, said Kitty as it cuddled up into the crook of her arm. I can't wait until tomorrow. Its voice muffled as it lapped at her. Maybe it's good you told Gina about me. I wouldn't want her to be too surprised. We'll have so much fun, responded Alicia as a deep fatigue overwhelmed her. The little girl sat cross-legged on the floor. Stop lying, said Gina. She was a pretty girl, taller than Alicia, but where Alicia was peaked and blonde, Gina had auburn hair, and her chubby face had a healthy ruddy glow. I'm not lying, responded Alicia defensively. You'll see with a bit of effort. She rose, crossed the room, and turned down the light. But you need to promise that you won't tell anybody. Gina rolled her eyes, whatever she said with dismissive disbelief. No, you need to really promise, pleaded Ollie. CIA, huh? Okay, I promise. Cross your heart, cross my heart, and hope to die, satisfy, Alicia called out in a loud whisper. Okay, Kitty, Gina's here, but it's safe to come out. Show her that you're real and that I'm not a liar. Gina stared in amazement as the little gray figure emerged from the shadows under Alicia's bed. At first it walked on all fours like a dog or wolf, but as it cleared the bed it rose onto two legs and looked up at Gina with its shining glass eyes. The little girl's amazement bubbled over into laughter as the gray creature raised an arm and spoke in a gravelly voice. Hi, I'm Kitty, it said. Alicia practically collapsed onto the floor next to Kitty and scooped him up in her arms. Kitty is my special friend, Gina's eyes show, and that is the coolest thing ever, she cried. Keep your voice down, commanded Alicia. My parents will hear. Almost on cue, a knock came on Alicia's door just before it swung open. Kitty's body went limp and slumped in Alicia's arms as her father's head poked. And, girls, he said, his voice a low whisper, keep it down. Gina's parents are coming early tomorrow to pick her up, and they might not let her sleep over again if you two are up all night. Okay, Daddy, responded Alicia. He smiled at his daughter and closed the door. Almost immediately life sprang back into Kitty's body. Let's play a game, it said quietly. The creature led the girls in a few short games of imagination and joined in for a game of Candyland before the girls decided to turn in. Can Kitty sleep with me? Asked Gina. Sorry, but Kitty needs to sleep in my bed. I'm his mommy, answered Alicia. Gina looked down with a pout. Don't worry, said Kitty. We'll play tomorrow. Okay, said Gina with a huff as she collapsed on the air mattress and pulled the covers over her up on the bed. Alicia and Kitty settled in for one last game of the night. Gina slowly opened her eyes and then caught her breath to see Kitty close to her face and looking at her. I'm cold, it said to her. Can I get under the covers with you? Gina lifted the comforter, the crater. He climbed in next to her and pressed itself against her body. You're fun to play with, it said. Gina smiled. You are too. I wish we could play every night. Yeah, but Mom and Dad won't let me stay overnight again. Not for a while. That's sad. I'll miss you. Can you give me a hug, please? Gina wrapped her arms around the furry plush body and smiled. Kitty whispered in her ear, well, Elle, if you can't sleep over here, maybe we could sleep over at your house. Probably not. Moms and dads need time to say yes or no. Maybe next week. That's so low. NG to wait. Kitty looked at Gina with desperation in its eyes. How about just me then? You can sneak me home in your night bag. Then you don't need to ask anybody. But what about Alicia? Won't she miss you? She'd be mad if I stole you. Silly, you can't steal me if I ask to go. Alicia will understand. Besides, I play with her every night, and you can get me back at school on Monday. I don't know, but I thought you loved me, and we can play together more. I know so many games that I'd love to teach you. Well, only if Alicia says it's okay. I don't want her to be mad at me. Kitty's wolfish face contorted into a broad grin that showed a row of thin, needle-like teeth. I'm sure she will. Gina awoke to the sound of knocking on Alicia's door. Girls, time to get up, called Alicia's dad. Gina's parents are here. It's time to go. Gina ambled out of the air mattress. But Alicia didn't stir. Gina went over and shook her friend's body a few times, but as he didn't respond at all, her cold little body just limply rolled over onto her belly. Gina frowned. She wanted to say goodbye to her friend, but she didn't want to get in trouble for making her parents wait either. She quickly got dressed and bent to stuff her bedclothes into her night bag. As she did, she caught a gleam of reflected light come from under Alicia's bed. There was Kitty looking at her longing. Please, it whispered. Gina's heart melted. She scooped up the creature and said, we'll all have so much fun playing tonight. Kitty looked concerned. All? Yeah, you, me, and my brother. You have a brother? Kitty seemed worried. Yeah, but don't worry. He's just a baby. He can't even talk yet. Kitty's face lit up. We're all going to have lots of fun. Girls, called Alicia's father, louder this time. Gina smiled at Kitty and gently tucked the creature down into her night bag. By Alicia, she called as she closed the door, but Alicia didn't respond. Her rigid and cold little body hadn't even moved. Story 4. Patricia. My house is so quiet, except for the pattering of the rain on the window and the scribble of my pen as I lie right in order to get a good night's sleep tonight, and the grandfather clock ticking. When I'm alone, I seem to pick up every little sound. To sleep without first recording what has happened, whoa, it'd be the worst thing I could do. I must record everything, every last detail. I cannot forget. I woke up with a sudden sense of dread, though of what I did not know, could not explain, and ultimately forgot as my senses came to me. I realized my family was already up and engaged in their morning routine. A glance at the clock radio on my nightstand and my customary verification by the clock on my wall told me that I had overslept by 15 minutes. Jumping out of bed, I hurriedly dressed, brushed my teeth, and was on my way down the stairs pulling my hair in to a ponytail when there was a knock on the door. It was uncommon to have a visitor this early in the morning, but being the closest to the door, I answered it. To my surprise, my good Fr. Yin Patricia was standing there in the heavy Florida morning air. I couldn't say I expected to see anyone in particular, but her being there was very unexpected. Aside from a sleepover or to that we had kept secret from my parents, she had never come to my house before. I asked her to come in, but instead she grabbed me by the wrist and pulled me outside, closing the door. Or as she did, "Patricia, what are you?" I started, but she cut me off. "Why won't you let your family meet me?" she asked angrily. I was completely dumbfounded by the question. "Petra, no, we've been friends for years and I don't understand. Why?" "Stop it." It was my turn to cut her off. I yanked my wrist out of her hand and took a step back, staring at her in surprise. She glared back at me. I had never seen her this angry. We stood there for a few seconds, and for a moment, all that broke the silence was her heavy breathing and the muted sounds of the waking neighborhood coming through the humid air. In an instant, she changed. Her anger dissipated, and she looked as normal as if we'd passed each other in the hallway at school. "So, do you think you can introduce me?" she asked, this time perfectly calm, as though the last 10 seconds hadn't even occurred. Still in shock, I took a second to take in what just happened and compose myself. "Patricia," I started, trying not to upset her again. "We've talked about this before, I know. But I really want to meet them now," was her reply, insistent. I couldn't even remember why we decided to not have Patricia come over. But although it had happened years ago, around the beginning of our friendship, and I had all but forgotten why, there was a very strong feeling within me urging me to keep that promise. Not knowing exactly why I felt this way, I said, "I'm just not sure that that's such a good idea." Almost too quick for me to see what looked like pure rage swept across her face, and in an instant was gone. She smiled her pretty smile that I'd seen a million times and said, "Okay, see you at school then, TH." And she was walking away down the sidewalk to the four-way stop and disappeared around the corner. I turned and opened the door to join my family for breakfast. But as I opened the door, I fell into blackness and awoke with a jolt. My mind was racing with random feelings and images that I couldn't piece together. A look at the clocks told me it was 10 minutes after I should have gotten up. I decided that the noise my family was making in the kitchen was what woke me up and quickly readied for the day. I was almost to the bottom of the stairs when I heard a knock at the door, feeling a wrong sense of deja vu. I walked over and answered it. Patricia was standing there, and my feeling of familiarity with the situation grew. Uneasy, I stepped out of the house and closed the door behind. "Emmy, morning. Can I see your family?" she asked sweetly. Why do I feel like she's asked this before, I thought. Without any reason I could think of, I suddenly knew that I could not allow her in the house. "No, Patricia, you can't," was all I could think of to say. But as she spoke, a sudden rush of fear swept over me. "No, I say, interrupting her. "Now, Gabrielle," she chided, calmly, serenely, "just let me in and we can." Now my fear was turning into unreasonable hysteria. "No, get away," I screamed. "Go away at this." "Bah!" Tricia's face turned to stone. Emotionless, cold, I reached behind me without turning and groped for the doorknob. Desperate to get inside, I felt like crying. "Fine," she said, and, turning, walked away. I took a step as it turned around to face the door and tripped on the door jamb. Before being consumed by an inky black, I woke up with tears running down my face, and I had no idea why I was crying. I was 5 minutes late in waking up, and could already hear the rest of my family downstairs in the kitchen. I was frightened for no apparent reason. I could only remember nothing substantial, feelings, fear, weakness. Eager to join my family, I quickly went about my morning routine and walked down the stairs. About halfway down, I suddenly felt an expectation of what I did not know. Reaching the bottom of the stairs, I turned to enter the kitchen, and there was a sudden banging on the front door. Dread shot through my body like lightning. Everything came flooding back, and I remembered Patricia in an instant. I didn't know why, but I knew that I had to keep her out. I ran to the door and opened it. Patricia flew at me with a wild look in her eyes, and I quickly closed the door. I heard her rebound 500 off of the sudden resistance, and took the opportunity to open the door and close it behind me as I stepped out. The morning was clear, but there were clouds on the horizon. Patricia was picking hazel. Up off the ground, I could hear the sound of a truck backing up in the distance. Tears were now flowing freely down my cheeks as I tried to reason with her. Patricia WHYRYW, as far as I got before her lips parted in a guttural scream, and she lunged at me again, her face contorted in hate. In reflex, I ducked and protectively raised my arms. She flew over my head and slammed into the door once again. Momentarily stunned, she fell on top of me. I pushed her off, but before I was able to recover, she was back on top of me, grabbing me by the throat. I tried prying her hands off, but her grip was too strong. I couldn't breathe. The beeping of the truck was growing louder. I could see Patricia's face, full of malice, over mine, but she grew dim. The beeping was louder, grating inside my head. She continued to choke me. Black mist invaded my vision, taking over. Then there was nothing but the beep, 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 beep. I woke violently to my alarm precisely when I was supposed to. The clock on the wall confirmed it. I could hear nothing. There was no sound coming from anywhere in the house, except for the ringing of the grandfather clock chiming the hour. Suddenly, I remembered everything vividly, trying to keep Patricia out and being strangled as a result. I jumped out of bed, not bothering to dress or brush my teeth, and ran downstairs. I threw open the front door, ready to do what it took to keep her away for good. There was no one on the porch, just the heavy Florida morning humidity and dark clouds, closer than in the dream. No Patricia. With a sigh of relief, I turned and went inside. As I started closing the door, I looked toward the kitchen and froze, standing in the doorway. Oh, the kitchen was Patricia. On her face was that smile I had seen on the face of my friend for years. In her hand was a carving knife I recognized from the knife block in our kitchen. I couldn't hear anything from the kitchen. Dread filled my body as I realized what had happened. She began walking toward me with that smile and that knife. I was far too frightened to move as she came in striking distance. She reached out and grabbed my wrist with her free hand and placed the knife in my hand. It was all I could do not to cry out when I felt the cold of the handle and the warm, sticky of what could only be the blood of my family. She released my hand, patted me on the cheek, and walked past me out the open door. I numbly walked to the door of the kitchen, and so what hour had I hoped to God I wouldn't, my family lying dead in pools of their own blood. My knees gave way, and I fell with a shallow splash next to my parents. I stared, unable to cry, unable to move. Hours said the rain came, and I realized that I have to remember what happened. Everything, Patricia, the dreams, everything. This dream is the worst. I am alone. My house is so quiet. Physicians. Note, Dr. Randall Launder. September 28th, 10, patient ID, GDS 1992. This document was collected at the scene of the murder of the patient's family. Patient was found sitting at her kitchen table, surrounded by their bodies. The murder weapon, carving knife, was found at the scene covered in the patient's prints and her family's blood. When questioned, she showed no apparent guilt or remorse and insisted Patricia did it, repeating the phrase ad nauseum. She was convicted of murder in the first degree on 3 counts, and custody was remanded to the psychological branch of the Federal Department of Corrections. Patient A exhibits signs of dementia and describes symptoms of homicidal bipolarism. She is currently incarcerated in the Southeastern Center for the Criminally Insane. As her treating physician, I suggest her treatment of high-dosage anti-hallucinogens be increased and her shock therapy sessions be reduced to twice a week. Will reevaluate patient in for weeks. Randall Marshall Launder, Ph.D. Story 5. Mr. Kicks's may all natural or intention of assumptions die here and remain here for as long as I, Holden J., shall live. Notwithstanding how short that may be, I hope that makes it clear straight off that this isn't going to be some cruddy tea party or some other stupid shit like that. This is going to be nothing but the truth. I swear you must be thinking that on discovering this scroll of text you've stumbled among a prank of a madman. Honestly, you just got to believe me and read what I have to say. I hardly believe it myself, and I saw it all with my own eyes where it all began. Nobody would ever figure. For me, it had just been another stupid and pointless day of higher education. Oh, how I remember the sharp dullness in the back of my head as my class discussed the J.D. Salingers, the catcher, and the rye. Nobody ever gets tired of analysis. The hell out of it. Sarcasm free of charge. Yes, smart asses. If you couldn't guess, I am named after Mr. Ong's dash-driven, dash-gray, dash-haired, dash-protagonist, dash-of-dash-woe himself. Now, what was I on about? Oh, yeah, the class. They kept going on about how the ducks were him, how he was the ducks, and blah. It drove me downright sick, really. So I just stood up and started for the door. The teacher gave me this funny look, like I'd hit him over the head with a suitcase full of rocks or something. He sounded as angry as a New York cab driver when he yelled where I was going without a pass. Snickering, I gave him my answer. Just going to check up the ducks in Central Park. Really? Or am I only checking up on myself? He sure as hell flew like a bat at me when I said that but a middle-aged man who's got a habit of chain smoking that makes his clothes stink like some burnt trash ain't fa. Iced tea. Not as fast as a slender scarecrow like me, I slipped through the door as I heard him bang against the other side. Must have hurt by the sound of it. Like a Golden Age cartoon, I wanted to laugh but felt bad for the poor guy. Really, I knew he'd be all right. He was a retired Marine. Still, when I think about it, I just can't help feeling bad about it. I just had to stop thinking about him, so I booked up way out of school via open windows and doors. I've never really been afraid of falling or nothing. Been in gymnastics classes before I could say I was 4 feet tall, and what a new why. Spring it was. Probably only 45 to 50 degrees at best. I zipped up my auburn long coat and donned my hunting hat from my pocket. Shut up. It's nothing like his. Anywho, I reckon it was about 10 minutes before I reached the meadow by the stream near the underpass as I sat down on the discolored and worn bench that had once been dark green in color. There was still a thin layer of ice on the riverbed, so I picked up a few pebbles as I planned to skip them across. Just as I drew my hand back to throw the first stone, I felt it grasped by a delicate gloved hand. Oh ho, and just what are you planning to do with these stones, Holden Jerome Grinman? I knew the voice all too well, and could smell the perfume she always wore. Lavender of some sort of herbal fusion added to it. I could never mistake this girl for any other. A lecture was sure to ensue. Shouldn't you be in class? Class is second priority when it comes to my personal matter with you. And for the last time, be formal when addressing me. You know it's Madam Violet Rowell. I couldn't help grin when she said that. Me and Vi go way back. She was the best girl-manast in the county. She was better than me at it, but she always put hard work into everything she did. She was naturally talented, too, but she felt she always had her family's name and wealth holding her back. I stood to face her, a white scarf wrapped round her neck, her black coat tight against her frame. All I could see she was wearing a medium-length checked skirt, while her legs wore white ankle socks, red loafers. How classy. The wind picked up lightly as it blew against her multiple ribbon-woven long blonde hair as she just stared at me whoa, trying to see into my soul. Miss V. She puffed her cheeks as I stood up standing next to her. I told you, Madam Violet Rowell. How's Miss Sexy? Then she blushed. Miss, I'm so sexy hot that I burn the sun. She held me in her arms, her face a darker shade of red as he, sky blue eyes looking happily at me. She leaned in close. You're a bad boy, Holden. We embraced each other. our Lee. T.S. becoming a tangled mess of oneness as our hands interlocked, if not traveling. Widely like Worms, it was cute in a way when she acted like this. But I got this weird sort of hormone-driven idea in my head. I kept thinking, gee, about the pattern she must have on her panties. I kept telling myself it must be white with pink bunnies. But another part of my mind argued it was inversed. I could go on about it, but I'll spare you the sexy stuff. Let's just say I don't know why I settled on tiger skin panties. We sat down after a few minutes of our embrace as she started talking again. Olden, you really shouldn't skip classes. Double quotes. I know. It's not like I do it all the time. You do it enough that Dad is worried about you, that I worry about you. I looked towards the stream. Had I never known her, I would be homeless. I was homeless. In one night it all happened. All in one night had my family gone from middle class to nothing. In one night did my father lost his mind and burn our house to the ground. In the rain had I managed to run from it all, blood-covered and wild-eyed. In the rain had she found me, curled up in a ball by the trash, weeping bitterly, like a dog, driven insane by disease. You shouldn't worry about me. I can manage on my own, she sighs. How's the essay coming, HM? Oh, you have. Had even started writing it. Have you? Well, just like you, a great writer, but you refuse to write because of your own ideals. I just think the catcher in the rye is. A loud trashing sound vibrates the air as we look at the underpass. A tall man in a dark suite waves to us. I felt uneasy. He seemed to be beckoning us to come. We looked at each other, unsure, but rose, walking slow towards him. The light grew dimmer the farther we went, but still pressed on. Oh, what fools we were! We couldn't make his face out well because of the light, but I figured he had a sleepy-eyed face because I saw nothing. In the dimness, his tone was an abnormal one of both oddity and smoothness. My name is Mr. Kicks's, pronounced just like Kicks. I have called you away from your normal life to ask you a simple question. Can you see the right? Perplexed by this odd question, we looked at each other before saying at the same time, rhythmically in tune with one another, what? His voice only became the more whisper the rye. Can you see it? Most folks can't. Most folks don't even know it exists, but I can show them. I've shown it before, but I never know what may happen. Sometimes folks feel it and go mad wanting to shoot people, and other time they just become comatose. So, can you see it, or shall I show it? We just stood there, at odds with each other. I'm sure she wanted to run like me, but we only heard in the dreaded darkness the whispering, almost alien now voice. So be it, I shall show you. Soon the tunneled underpass began to become illuminate as the strange man was making odd gestures on a morbid-like motion. With a bright flash, was it filled with colors and shapes I had never seen before nor since. I could scarcely describe it, for it seemed to transcend my senses. I felt it overlapping my very being. What would have happened should I had remained among that phantasm, I will never know, for the spell was broken by V pulling on my sleeve as she spoke weakly. Holden, I turned to her and at once felt the dread worse than I thought I could ever feel. Her body was enveloped in what looked like shadows, but I knew it was something viler than my darkest imaginings. Her skin was turning a stone gray, her eyes becoming white as the life seemed to be draining from her in ways of pure terror. Run, holdin' this thing, it's nothing but a living virus. It fooled us. It's got me now. I love you. R-U-N. Her hand seemed to crumble onto my clothing before I scarcely looked upon this monster. The shadows spared my sanity. What I could see its arms and legs had been a hoax as they appeared to be. Lashings, hook-like tendrils, face. There was none but a large gaping maw and a single burning eye. Screaming, running, tripping, stumbling, sweaty, vomiting, bleeding, all with heart pulsating. I ran faster than anyone has ever run. I never looked back and never went back, I just kept running. Life lacks normality and sanity. Oh me, now all of that died when that thing stole it from. Emmy, I scatter this wherever I go, telling what I can of this nightmare in fragments. On the run for my own safety, however, I will tell in this fragment alone, but I will say the unsaid. I think a piece of that thing got on me somehow. I think it's been changing me slowly. I look in the mirror and I down. See my face sometimes. My hands look like ropey hooks. I don't know how much longer I can keep myself together. I think I'm turning into that ... Story 6. My dog won't stop staring. My dog won't stop staring at me. Sounds like a trivial problem, I know. Just ignore her or block her view or shift location. But after weeks and weeks on end, I've finally had enough of it. And having that creeping sensation come over your skin, that feeling that you're surely being watched, I guarantee that you'd have had enough, too. She's a small dog, a little mixed breed named Ruby I picked up by chance one afternoon. I was particularly bummed out driving home from the doctor's office when they confirmed that the throbbing, burning ache in my shoulder was enough to take me out of the sport I so loved, lacrosse, which is what got me to my school in the first place on scholarship, and now I was out of the game, maybe for the whole season, and when I saw those big black eyes peering out at me from the dog shelter, I figured I could use a companion. At first her gaze seemed nice, even a bit cute, but now I can't get those eyes off of me. No matter what I do, it started not long after I brought her home. I'd already been warned that it will take a dog a few days to get acclimated to its new surroundings, but luckily she was already house-trained and my apartment is carpeted, so no risk of clawing up the floor, and it turned out she's a rather easy-going dog. I live on the first floor, so she can go outside when she likes, but more often she's in the living room with me, lounging around in her dog bed or next to me on the couch when I'm doing my homework or surfing the web. Even when I'm gone, she isn't destructive, and to my surprise, hasn't chewed or slobbered or peed on anything in my absence. She's usually well behaved like that, but then the staring began. For a few days I dismissed it as nothing. After all, she was new to this place, and I thought she just vet attention, being stuck in that shelter for God knows how long. Most of the time after her staring, she'd wait patiently for me to pat the couch cushion, giving her permission to jump on and curl up next to me. I figured the staring was her way of asking for things. When I wasn't in the room with her, she would frantically begin to sniff and search for me all over the apartment as if I'd abandoned her. Whining quietly, the nose began to get on my nerves, and so I started sending her outside. This place didn't come with a big backyard, but it was fenced and a decent size F or a small dog. So I'd let her stay out and run around, and again, at first, that's what she did. Rolled on her back, did her business, pawed the grass and all that stuffed dogs usually do. But so, one or later I'd find her an inch away from the sliding glass door, her big wet eyes begging to be let back in, and so I would with some unease. She seemed to spend less and less time out there, asking it only to go to the bathroom, and wanted to have more and more time with me. I've never liked the feeling of being watched. As far back as I can remember, I've hated having that sickly, creepy, crawly sensation that I'm not alone, and even when she was in the other room, I swear I could feel it. Her whining turned to plaintive wails, and little doggy howls every minute I was out of her sight. Like I said, I'm living here on my own, and I tried not to let it bother me. Even when she moved from sleeping at the foot of the bed to practically right up against me, even as I lay there trying to sleep, she would just stare and stare. I thought maybe her former owners were abusive, or that they didn't show her any affection. When I took her to get the shots she needed, I even asked the veterinarian, but she shrugged it off as being normal dog behavior, possibly just a little more clingy than most. She just wants to be close to you. The vet told me a lot of dogs stare. It's not uncommon. Maybe she was right. The retriever in the waiting room seemed to gaze unending at me too. Like I said, I never liked that feeling. So I tried to accept that some dog behaviors might just be weird that way. And yet as time went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that the staring had become more intense, somehow, like she was looking really deeply at me. That was when I started to get annoyed. Sure, she's just a dog, but why would she incessantly need to look at me like that? It didn't matter if she was yards across the room or right beside me on the sofa. Her giant, forlorn-looking NG eyes bore holes through me. It was unnerving. I started to move around, positioning my laptop so that when she was on the floor or in her doggy bed, I couldn't see her. But call me crazy, I swear I could feel her staring at me. To make matters worse, the crying turned into full-on barking whenever we weren't together. I'd send her outside for a while, but she just sat at the front step waiting to be let back in. It's not that I didn't care about my dog anymore. I just couldn't get a break from the constant pleading eyes. And so I decided to willfully ignore her. I still filled her bowls with food and water, still let her out to the yard and back in, even left her a treat now and then, but otherwise I didn't want to be around her. It didn't help that I was now spending a lot more time at home. Watching my college team play without me had grown more than a little miserable. And finally, I just stopped showing up. The doctor thought it might be my rotator cuff, and other than some physical therapy, exercises, and icing it, there was nothing more to be done for it. It wasn't bad enough for surgery, but not well enough for me to go back to lacrosse, at least for now, and aspirin didn't seem to touch it. So not only was I home a lot more, but I was in significant pain, and my left shoulder started acting up, and there was my dog Ruby just staring away like it was her goal in life to annoy me. Last night I'd finally had enough. Go outside, I shouted, Sliding open the glass door with my good arm, the dog meekly trotted onto the steps and sat down. Good, and stay there. I closed her out and walked away, agitated and with my shoulder twitching painfully, still knowing that she was watching me through the door. Her white, soulful eyes followed me down the hall, and even when I was in my living room, at an angle from the backyard and out of view completely, I didn't feel alone. I could sense he are looking at me. I went to the fridge and got a beer, and then another, and it was a couple more before I finally realized how late it had gotten, and that I had left Ruby outside for so long on a chilly night. I was actually feeling sorry for her as I walked over, a little tipsy, to retrieve my dog. I mean, she's just an animal. It's what they do, right? But sure enough, when I got there, I found her looking directly into my eyes through the glass door. It may have been the beer, but I could swear those eyes looked almost human, and they wouldn't stop staring. I flung open the door in anger so hard it hit the edge and nearly slid back, and grabbed Ruby by the collar, dragging her inside and shutting it behind me. Stop this. Do you understand me? Why do you have to always stare at me? Later, when I'd sobered up, I realized how ridiculous this whole thing must have seemed. Me shouting drunk demands at a small dog. But I'd had it with her completely. Her eyes answered back with a mournful gaze. That was it. You sleep here tonight. Understand? You made me do this. I practically threw her into the hard metal crate I'd gotten at the shelter, lined at the bottom with a dingy old blanket, which I'd never made her sleep the whole night in. I knew she didn't like the crate, but I took a kind of perverse glee in that fact, and she let out an unhappy whine as I fastened the crate door shut, her eyes still darting to meet mine. I ignored her occasional cries and went back to my beer, which to my disappointment did very little to ease the sharp pains in my shoulder. I'd probably end up back at the doctor's at this rate. Knowing I would have to pass her crate to get to my bedroom, I admit I stole a little, tidying up the room and tossing out the empty bottles. But eventually I had to face it. Without giving Ruby or the crate so much as a glance, I walked down the hall, shut the bedroom door, and Jen Curley got into my bed. Maybe I was wrong to get a dog after all. I would have to think on it more when I was sober and address the problem in the morning. Maybe with another visit to the vet. Maybe she was just sick. I mean, I have no idea why a dog would act this way. Ruby glared as best she could as soon as her master entered her field of vision, but her humans seemed wobbly, and happy with her. Upon their shuffling into the kitchen, she whimpered softly and drew herself back towards the corner of the crate. Her owner didn't even take a moment to look over at her. The entity behind them, however, did. She was always trying to break it down, to make it leave her master alone, but it would only sink its claw deeper into their shoulder and tighten its grip, and so the entity spread its ropey black lips and flashed the dull rows of smiling needle teeth, trailing as it always did directly behind her master. Story 7. The note. This is a love story. Please try to remember that as you read this, love. It's really about Julie. I knew from the moment I set eyes on her that I'd do anything to have her. Fortunately, though, I didn't have to work very hard. I could see it in her eyes the first time I talked to her and asked her out. She wanted me to, and she said yes before I even finished asking. Her eyes sparkle like diamonds. It's one of my favorite things about her. We were quick to say I love you, only a few dates, but we were sure. My place is full of my idiot friends, and we've started talking about getting a place of our own. My best friend, Greg, doesn't get along the best with her and isn't very happy about me moving out, but he understands. We all hang out together sometimes, see movies, bowl, normal stuff like that. Well, I got a call a couple nights ago from Julie's parents, who live out of state. They said they got a call from the police and that Julie had been in a car accident. Drunk driver crossed the center line. What a click, he right. Anyway, I was panicked out of my mind, speeding like crazy to the hospital when Julie called me on my cell. I could hardly believe my eyes when I saw her name on the called ID. I answered TH. He phoned, not quite letting myself get my hopes up just yet. After all, it could have been someone calling me from her phone. Relief washed over me like rain when I heard her voice. Baby, I am okay. It wasn't that bad, just some bumps and bruises. The airbags and seat belt did all the work. Are you okay? I don't mind admitting I pulled over and cried for a long time. She said she was checking out of the hospital shortly, and I could pick her up there. When I got to the hospital, I had myself pretty well composed. I walked in and was just making my way to the help desk when I hear her call my name. I turned around and saw her. The sparkle was out of her eyes, which wasn't that surprising, I thought, considering what had happened, but otherwise seemingly none the worse for the wear. I completely lost what composure I thought I had. I broke down again, and we held each other, and she slid her hand onto the back of my neck and into my hair like she does when I am upset, and after a minute or two we made our way to my car. Julie told me the drunk driver had been killed, and I thought good, better him than Julie, and I'm not the least bit ashamed of it. I would have killed him myself if I could have, but she was okay, and that was all I cared about then. When we got back to my place, no one was home, and the house was dark, which was odd, since there was almost always someone home, and those idiot roommates of mine always forget to kill the lights when they leave. Julie was feeling a little chilly, and she looked a little pale, so we cuddled you under some blankets and fell asleep almost immediately. It had been a trying day after all. I remember the last thing she said to me as we were falling asleep. I'll love you forever, baby. I called into work the next day to stay home with Julie. She was feeling pretty stiff. Again, not surprising. I had some missed calls from family and friends. No doubt they'd heard what happened and were checking in. I'd get back to them later. Maybe it was just the accident, or that I hadn't seen Julie without makeup in ever. But she didn't look very good. I mean, her color was off and her eyes looked slightly hollow, and the sparkle still wasn't there. I suggested taking her back to the hospital, but she insisted she was fine, just tired and sore. Well, a couple more days went by and I told work I was staying home with Julie until she was feeling better. But she wasn't getting better. Her eyes were the worst of it, more hollow all the time, and her skin was downright cold to the touch. It was getting to the point where I was going to bring her back to the hospital, whether she wanted to go or not, and that was when I got the phone call It was Julie's mom. She had been crying and was clearly making an effort to stay composed. Julie's service was to be held the day after tomorrow, she said. I asked her what she was talking about. Service for what? IW. As confused, Julie walked up to me as I stood there on the phone. She was looking right into my eyes when her mom said, I know this is hard for you. It's hard for all of us. But Julie has gone and we can't bring her back. We all loved her, but she's gone. I still didn't understand until I saw the look of horror in Julie's eyes. She knew. This whole time she knew. She didn't. T survived the accident, yet somehow she was here, and suddenly I understood. Her eyes, hollow and sunk in, the sparkle gone, her skin cold and discolored. She was dead, and I was watching her slowly decay. My stomach dropped, and I felt myself fall. Julie caught me, and I felt her cold hands and felt the coldness for what it was, death. I heard her mom on the phone, a tiny voice calling my name over and over. I picked up the phone and told her I was listening. Julie silent the whole time. Her mom repeated that the service was the day after tomorrow, and her body would be cremated at noon the next day. Numb. Lie, I told her okay, thanked her, and told her I see her then. I hung up the phone, and Julie and I just stared at each other for a long time. There was no doubt now I was looking at someone who was not alive. Eventually I said one word, how? She said she didn't know, and she didn't care. And you know what? Neither did I. She came with me to the service, and it wasn't like what happens in the movies where people walk through her like she's not there or anything like that. They couldn't see her, that much was obvious. But somehow no one bumped into her, and when they made space for me, it seemed they made space for her too, although they didn't seem to know they were doing it. When I talked to her parents, she was with me, silent but strong for me. When I viewed her body, she was with me, her hand cold now, so cold finding that spot on my neck. She looked exactly as she always had, beautiful, healthy. But I knew it was makeup and artificial. Underneath she would look exactly like the Julie that had her cold hand on my neck. It was a hard thing, looking down at her, but she was so supportive, and I knew this was why I loved her and couldn't be without her. We left and went back to my place. My roommates were home. Tut stayed out of our way as we went to my room. That night we didn't sleep. We just held each other, and I didn't care at all how cold she was. We cried and talked, laughed at the funny memories, and cried more. We didn't talk about what was happening or what was going to happen. As darkness began to loss, the battle and light filled the sky, a horrifying thought occurred to me, and somehow I knew it would be true. I was seeing Julie as she was. I mean, literally seeing her as her body was, and she was set to be cremated at noon. Do you understand? She was to be burned until nothing would be left but ash, and I would have to watch it happen. I was on the phone immediately to her parents, to the funeral home, to her church. No one would listen. They all thought it was grief. I felt rage and despair building inside me, and was about to completely break down when I felt her hand on my neck in that spot, and she turned my head so I was looking into her eyes, now very hollow and turning grotesque. She told me it was okay. It was okay. She told me she would love me forever, and I knew in that moment what I was going to do. Those last few hours we watched the sun come up and what became a beautiful day. We watched clouds turn into funny shapes. As noon approached, Ty made an excuse to go to my closet, and then we waited. When noon hit, we were both crying again, but nothing happened. We were just starting to wonder what that meant when I saw the look in her eyes. Just as before, she knew. She felt it before I saw it. She told me it didn't hurt. It doesn't hurt, baby. She began to smoke, and her hair caught on fire. A cold calm set over me, and I took her tight into my arms. The flames began to burn me too. She tried to push me away, to protect me. She fought my hold, but her strength was fading. I could feel the flames now burning into me, but I didn't care. I wouldn't let her go through this alone, and I didn't need to live much longer anyway. We didn't scream. We just sat there together and burned. Her hair was gone and her face and skin turned black, and I held her tighter and to my chest. I told her I'd love her forever and that I'd see her soon. I held her until she was ash in my arms, and she fell through my fenge. I reached for what I had taken out of the closet, and suddenly she was gone. Not a trace of her left. No ash remained anywhere. Nothing was burned. Even my own burns were gone. Was it grief? Did I imagine the whole thing? Was she ever here? I don't know. But I wrote this so my family and friends know why I had to do this. I won't stay here without her. I can't. I'll find her somehow, and the sparkle will be in her eyes again, and everything will be okay. And like it was, I'm sorry about this, Mom, Dad. But I hope you understand. I'm going now. I hope I don't get blood on this.